"You can't stop us from coming in." That's what she said, standing outside my gate with her clipboard and her fake smile. She thought I was just another old man who'd roll over because some homeowners association told him to. She was wrong. This land has been in my family since 1947. My grandfather earned it with his blood. My father kept it with his sweat. My wife made me promise to protect it. And when I refused to open that gate, the air between us went cold. I watched something shift in her eyes. That's when everything changed. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. The coffee was still hot when I stepped out onto the porch that morning. Steam curled up from the mug, disappearing into the cool air like smoke from an old fire. The sun rose over the ridge, throwing long shadows across the land my grandfather claimed in 1947. The oak tree stood at the center, silent and strong. Fence posts lined the edges, the old gate at the drive's end holding firm despite time. It wasn't just metal and hinges, it was memory, the line between then and now. I could hear birds in the distance. Cardinals, probably. Maeve used to love watching them from this exact spot. She'd sit in the old rocking chair with her tea pointing out the red flashes in the branches. That was before the cancer took her 3 years ago. She made me promise near the end that I wouldn't let anyone take this place from us. Not developers, not the county, not anyone. I told her I wouldn't. I meant it. The wood beneath my boots creaked as I shifted my weight, the sound familiar and grounding. This porch had held my grandfather after the war, my father after long days in the fields, and now me. Some things don't need to change. The property stretched out before me, mostly wild. Grass grew tall in places, clusters of wildflowers where Maeve used to plant bulbs every spring. The house itself was old timber built in the 20s, patched and repaired over decades, but never replaced. I liked it that way. It had character, history, the kind of place that remembered the people who lived in it. Beyond the fence line, I could see the new development. Silver Ridge Estates, they called it. Rows of identical houses with perfect lawns and mailboxes that all looked the same. They had been building for 2 years now, carving up farmland and selling it off in quarter-acre lots. I watched it happen. Watched the bulldozers come in, watched the trees come down, watched families move in with their SUVs and their neighborhood rules. They had their world. I had mine. That's when I noticed the white SUV. It pulled up just outside my gate, slow and deliberate, like whoever was driving wanted to make sure I saw them. A woman stepped out first. Middle-aged, well-dressed, the kind of outfit that said she had somewhere important to be, but was making time for this. She had a clipboard. That should have been my first warning. A man followed her out of the passenger side, younger, wearing a suit that looked too expensive for a Saturday morning. He had a leather folder tucked under one arm. They stood there for a moment, looking through the bars of the gate at my land. The woman pointed at something, said something to the man, and he nodded. Then she pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. I didn't move, just stood there on the porch, coffee in hand, watching them the way you watch strangers who don't know they're being observed. The woman glanced up after the third or fourth photo and saw me. Our eyes met across the distance. She smiled, not a friendly smile, the kind of smile people use when they're pretending to be friendly, but really just sizing you up. I didn't smile back, didn't wave, didn't do anything. Just held her gaze until she looked away. The man with the folder noticed me too. He said something to the woman and she laughed. Not loud, but I heard it carry across the morning air. Then they got back in the SUV and drove off. The whole thing lasted maybe 5 minutes. I went back inside and set my coffee on the kitchen table. The house was quiet, too quiet sometimes, but I'd learned to live with it. I walked over to the filing cabinet in the corner, the one I'd kept since my days practicing real estate law, and pulled out the drawer marked property. Everything was there. The original deed signed by my grandfather in 1947, a wartime document for returning veterans legally ironclad. Survey maps, tax records going back decades, every piece of paper that proved this land was mine. I'd kept it all organized out of habit, the same way I used to organize case files. You never know when you'll need proof. That's what 30 years as a lawyer teaches you. Document everything. Trust nothing. I pulled out the deed and read through it one more time. Clear title, no easements, no encumbrances. No homeowners association, because this land existed long before any association did. I folded it back up and put it away, then walked to the window. The gate was still there, standing at the end of the drive like it always had. But something felt different now. I couldn't put my finger on it, just a sense that the morning's visitors weren't a casual curiosity. They were scouting, planning. I'd seen that look before in depositions and negotiations. The look of people who think they've already won. The morning passed in quiet routine, walking the fence, cutting back brush, tightening a board on the porch steps. The work steadied me, kept my thoughts from drifting to the past and Maeve's absence. By noon, I was back inside heating up leftover soup when I remembered something: the security camera. I'd installed it 6 months ago, just a simple motion-activated setup aimed at the gate, mostly to keep track of deer and the occasional delivery truck. I hadn't checked the footage in weeks. I pulled up the app on my phone and scrolled back to this morning. There they were, the white SUV, the woman with the clipboard, the man with the folder. I zoomed in. The license plate was visible, so were their faces. I saved the clip, just in case. That night I stood at the gate one last time before heading to bed. The metal was cool under my palm, solid and unyielding. I tested the lock, still secure. I looked out at the road at the distant glow of the new development streetlights. They had their rules over there, their committees and their votes and their dues. But this side of the gate was mine. It had been earned, not bought, earned in blood and sweat and promises kept. I turned back toward the house, and as I walked, I heard the gate creak slightly in the wind. It wasn't a sound of weakness. It was a sound of endurance, of something that had been tested and remained. I locked the door behind me, set the deadbolt, and turned off the lights. The land outside went dark and quiet, and I knew somewhere deep in my gut that the quiet wouldn't last. The letter arrived 3 days later, plain white envelope, no return address, just a logo in the corner, Silver Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. I opened it standing at the mailbox, the metal still warm from the afternoon sun. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly typed, polite in that way that isn't really polite at all. It invited me to join the association. Invited, as if I had a choice. As if my land, which had been here decades before their development even broke ground, somehow fell under their jurisdiction now. The letter talked about community standards, neighborhood beautification, and shared values. It mentioned a timeline, 10 days to respond. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and walked back to the house. I filed it in the cabinet under property and didn't write back. Saturday morning came around again. I was replacing a section of fence wire when I heard the knock. Not on the door, on the gate. I straightened up, wiped my hands on my jeans, and walked down the drive. They were standing there. The same woman from before, the same man in the suit. Up close I could see more details. Her hair was perfect. Too perfect. The kind of perfect that takes an hour and a standing appointment. She wore a vest with the HOA logo embroidered on the chest. The man had a clipboard this time. They both smiled when they saw me approaching. I didn't smile back. I stopped on my side of the gate and waited. "Mr. Waverly," the woman said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "I'm Rhonda Prescott, president of the Silver Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. This is Dalton Kirby, our legal counsel." She gestured to the man beside her. He nodded once, the kind of nod lawyers give when they want you to know they're lawyers. "We just wanted to have a friendly conversation about the letter we sent. Did you receive it?" I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. "I got it," I said. She waited like she expected me to say more. When I didn't, she continued. "Wonderful. So, you understand that we're representing over 300 families in this community. We're working hard to maintain property values and create a cohesive neighborhood aesthetic. Your property, while lovely in its own right, sits adjacent to our development. We were hoping you might consider joining our association. It would benefit everyone." I let the silence sit for a moment. I watched her smile start to tighten at the edges. "My land's been here since 1947, I said finally. "Long before your association existed. I don't need to join anything." Dalton stepped forward slightly, his folder tucked under his arm like a weapon. "Mr. Waverly, modern property law has evolved significantly. There are zoning considerations, community impact assessments, and regional planning initiatives that affect all landowners in a given area. We're not asking for much, just cooperation." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was young, mid-30s maybe, probably thought his law degree made him smarter than everyone in the room. "What law requires me to join your association?" I asked. He hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "Well, it's not a legal requirement per se, but there are provisions under county ordinance that allow for." "So no law," I said. "No law requires me to join. Rhonda cut in, her smile still plastered on but losing its warmth. Mr. Waverly, we're not trying to be difficult. We're offering you support, financial assistance for landscaping improvements, free consultation with our approved contractors, even a reduction in association dues for the first year. We want to help you bring your property up to community standards. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just recognition. I'd seen this play before, the soft approach, the offers that sound generous but come with strings. I don't need help, I said, and my property is already at the standard I want, which is my standard, not yours. The smile finally cracked. Not much, but enough. Rhonda glanced at Dalton, then back at me. You understand, of course, that community sentiment matters. People talk. They notice when one property doesn't align with the rest. It can create friction. Is that a threat? I asked. She laughed, light dismissive. Of course not. Just an observation. We all have to live together, Mr. Waverly. It's easier when everyone cooperates. Dalton added, we have processes in place for addressing non-compliance. Respectful processes, of course, but processes nonetheless. I looked at them both, saw exactly what they were, not neighbors, not community leaders, just people who'd gotten used to having authority and didn't like hearing the word no. I think we're done here, I said. I turned to walk back toward the house. Behind me, I heard Rhonda say something to Dalton, too quiet for me to make out. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of a phone camera clicking. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't turn around, just kept walking. Let them take their pictures. Let them document whatever they thought they were documenting. That evening I opened my laptop and searched for the community's social media group. Found it easily enough. Public page, over 400 members. I scrolled through the posts, mostly mundane stuff. Lost pets, garage sales, recommendations for contractors. Then I saw it, posted 2 hours ago. A photo of my property taken from outside the gate. The caption read, "Neighbor refuses to improve property appearance despite community request. How do we change outdated thinking?" The comments were already piling up. Some are sympathetic to me, most weren't. Words like selfish, inconsiderate, property value killer. One person called me a recluse. Another suggested the county should intervene. I read through them all, my jaw tight, my hands steady. Then I took screenshots. Every single comment, every single reaction. Saved them to a folder on my desktop labeled evidence. I didn't respond, didn't engage. That's what they wanted. They wanted me angry, wanted me defensive, wanted me to lash out so they could point and say, "See, difficult, unreasonable." I wasn't going to give them that. I'd spent 3 decades in courtrooms. I knew how this worked. You don't win by yelling, you win by building a case, brick by brick, document by document. So, I documented. I saved the post. I saved the letter. I saved the photos from my security camera showing them at my gate. I created a timeline in a notebook, old school the way I used to track discovery in complex cases. Date, time, what happened, who was there, what was said. Every detail mattered. Every interaction was evidence. By the time I closed the laptop, it was past midnight. The house was dark except for the lamp on my desk. Outside, the land was quiet. The gate stood at the end of the drive, exactly where it had always been. Locked, secure, mine. I thought about Maeve and the promise that still lived here. Her voice stayed with me. Don't let them take what we built. It wasn't about stubbornness, it was about keeping faith. Some things are meant to be defended, and some gates stay closed for a reason. I turned off the lamp and walked to the window. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows across the yard. I could see the outline of the oak tree, the fence posts, and the gate. All of it standing, all of it holding. I knew they'd come back. People like Rhonda always did. They didn't give up when you said no once. They escalated. They were pressured. They made life difficult until you gave in. But I'd been a lawyer long enough to know something they didn't. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is preparation. The rumors started small. A neighbor mentioned it to me at the post office about a week later. Said she'd heard something about environmental concerns on my property. Hazardous materials, maybe. She didn't sound accusatory, just curious. Worried even. I thanked her for letting me know and didn't elaborate. But I knew where it came from. By the end of that week, the whispers had grown into something louder. Someone reported a strange smell coming from my land. No specifics, no proof. Just an anonymous complaint filed with the county environmental office. I knew because they sent me a letter, polite bureaucratic, asking permission to conduct an inspection. I called them back the same day. Told them I'd cooperate fully, but only with an official order, not a request, an order. The woman on the phone seemed surprised, said most people just let them come out. I told her I wasn't most people. She called back 2 days later, said they'd reviewed the complaint and found no legal basis for an inspection. The report had been submitted via email, anonymous, no supporting evidence, no witness statements, nothing actionable. She apologized for the inconvenience. I thanked her and asked her to send me confirmation in writing. She did. I filed it with the rest of my growing collection. The pattern was clear now. They were using the system, trying to pressure me through official channels, hoping I'd fold under the weight of bureaucracy. It might have worked on someone else, someone who didn't know how the system worked, but I'd spent 3 decades navigating it. I knew which buttons to push and which threats were hollow. This was harassment dressed up as civic duty, and it was just getting started. The next escalation came in the mail, a formal-looking envelope with a law firm's return address. I opened it standing in the kitchen, the paper crisp and expensive under my fingers. Cease and desist. That's what the header said. The letter accused me of obstructing community welfare and creating a public nuisance. It demanded I open my property for inspection by the Homeowners Association within 48 hours. Failure to comply would result in legal action. It was signed by their legal counsel. I read it 3 times, my years of practice kicking in automatically. I looked for the case number. There wasn't one. I looked for the court seal. There wasn't one. I looked for specific statute citations. There were none. Just vague language about county ordinances and community standards. It was a bluff. A well-formatted, official-looking bluff. But a bluff nonetheless. I picked up my phone and called the number at the bottom of the letter. He answered on the 3rd ring. Professional voice. Confidence. I kept my tone neutral. "This is Clint Waverly. I received your letter. I want to confirm, is this an official court document?" There was a pause. Just a second. But I heard it. "It's a formal notification from our office representing the Homeowners Association," he said. "A formal notification," I repeated. "Not a court order." Another pause. "It's a preliminary step. We're trying to resolve this amicably before involving the courts." I let the silence hang between us. Let him feel it. "So, to be clear, you're threatening legal action, but you haven't actually filed anything. Is that correct?" His voice shifted, became more cautious. "Mr. Waverly, we're simply trying to facilitate cooperation. This doesn't need to become adversarial." "Then don't send threatening letters," I said. "If you have a legitimate legal claim, file it. Otherwise, this is harassment." I heard him take a breath, start to say something. I hung up. My hand was steady. My pulse wasn't racing. I'd been through worse negotiations than this. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a small recording device. I'd used it for years back when I was still practicing. In this state, single-party consent was legal. I could record any conversation I was part of. I connected it to my phone and tested it. Clear audio. Perfect. If they called again, I'd be ready. I filed the cease and desist letter with the others. Added a note to my timeline. Documented the call. The hour. What was said. What wasn't said. Every gap in their argument was another crack in their case. That same week, the association held a community meeting. I didn't attend. I wasn't a member. But I heard about it afterward from the same neighbor who'd mentioned the rumors. She said the president had brought up my property, framed it as a community concern, said they were exploring options to encourage compliance. The neighbor seemed uncomfortable telling me, said most people at the meeting looked uneasy. A few spoke up in my defense, said I had a right to my own land, but the majority stayed quiet. That's how these things work. Fear of standing out. Fear of being next. I thanked her for the information and didn't express anger. I didn't need to. Anger wasn't useful. Information was. What I didn't know yet was that someone inside their organization was paying attention. One of their own staff members had started noticing inconsistencies, money being moved without proper authorization, meetings held without minutes, decisions made behind closed doors. This person had access to emails, financial records, and internal communications. And this person was starting to ask questions. I didn't know any of this at the time, but the cracks were forming, not in my defense, in theirs. While they were busy trying to break me down, their own foundation was crumbling. I spent those 2 weeks doing what I always did, maintaining the property, fixing what needed fixing, living my life, but I also spent time preparing. I pulled my old case files from storage, reviewed litigation strategies, refreshed my memory on property law harassment statutes, defamation standards. I contacted an old colleague, someone I'd worked with on complex real estate disputes. We had coffee. I laid out the situation. He listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back and smiled. "You've got a case," he said, "a good one." "I don't want money," I told him. "I want them to stop." He nodded. "Then we make it public. We make it hurt. Not financially, reputationally." I thought about that, about what the public meant, about taking something private and dragging it into the light, about forcing people to see what was really happening. I thought about Maeve, about promises, about lines that shouldn't be crossed. "Let's wait," I said. "Let's see how far they're willing to go." He understood, told me to keep documenting, keep records, keep everything. I already was. By the time I left that coffee shop, I had a plan. Not just a defensive plan, an offensive one. But I wasn't going to move until they did. I was going to let them think they were winning, let them get bold, let them make mistakes, because people who think they're untouchable always do. The motion alert woke me at 2 a.m. I'd set my phone to vibrate for the security camera loud enough to cut through sleep, but not loud enough to panic. I reached for it on the nightstand, squinting at the screen in the darkness. 3 figures, standing at my gate. I sat up slowly, my heart rate steady, my mind already processing. I didn't turn on any lights, didn't make noise, just watched the live feed as they worked on the lock. One of them had bolt cutters. The camera had good resolution, even in low light. I could make out faces. The association president, her legal counsel, and a third person I didn't recognize. Probably hired help. The locksmith hesitated, said something I couldn't hear. The president gestured impatiently. Then I saw her hand something to him. Cash. The audio pickup on the camera was decent. I turned up the volume on my phone. Her voice came through clearly. "We just need to get in to take photos of a few violations and file the report. Simple." The lawyer's voice was quiet or uncertain. "What if he wakes up?" She laughed, low confident. "He's an old man living alone. No one's going to believe him over 300 families. The community's already on our side." The locksmith spoke up. "I don't want legal trouble." She pulled out more bills. $500. You do the work, I handle everything else. I watched them. I watched the locksmith take the money. I watched the bolt cutters bite through the lock. I watched my gate swing open. The whole time I was recording, not just the camera feed. I grabbed my backup phone and started a secondary recording just in case. Redundancy. That's what good documentation requires. I stayed in the dark, stayed quiet, let them commit. They walked onto my property like they owned it. The president had her phone out, using the flashlight to illuminate the area around the house. She pointed at the stack of firewood I kept covered by a tarp. "That," she said, "that's a fire hazard, unmaintained storage." The lawyer took a photo. They moved to the side yard where I kept old lumber and tools. "Debris," she said, "code violation." More photos. Then I watched something that made my jaw tighten. The president pulled something from her bag. Plastic trash bags, empty paint cans. She started placing them around the property. Staging, creating evidence that didn't exist. The lawyer helped her, arranged the items. I took more photos, made sure the angles looked organic, like I'd been hoarding waste. I recorded all of it, every movement, every planted item, every manufactured violation. I gave them 10 more minutes. Let them build their false case. Let them feel secure in their deception. Then I called 911. Kept my voice calm, professional. "I have 3 individuals trespassing on my property. I'm inside the house safe, but I need a police response." The dispatcher asked if I was in danger. I said no. Said I had video evidence. Said I'd wait for officers to arrive. She told me units were on the way. I stayed on the line until I saw the lights. Red and blue flashing through the trees at the end of my drive. The 3 of them froze. The president's face went white in the sudden illumination. They started moving toward the gate, but 2 officers were already there, blocking the exit. One of the officers called out, "Hands where we can see them. Nobody moves." I turned on my porch light and stepped outside. One of the officers recognized me. We'd met before at a community safety meeting years back. "Mr. Waverly," he said, "you all right?" I nodded. "I'm fine, They cut my lock and entered without permission. It's all on camera. I held up my phone showing him the saved footage. The second officer was already talking to the president. She was trying to explain, trying to justify. "We're just inspecting community property," she said. Her voice had lost all its polish. The officer cut her off. "This isn't community property, it's private property. Do you have a warrant?" She didn't answer. The lawyer tried to intervene. "We represent the homeowners association. We have authority to—" The officer shook his head. "Not here, you don't. Not without the owner's permission or a court order." I walked down to the gate, unlocked my phone, and pulled up the full video. I have everything from the moment they arrived. Audio and visual. They discussed breaking in. Money changed hands. They planted false evidence. I gestured toward the scattered trash bags and paint cans. "Those aren't mine. They brought them." The first officer looked at the items, then back at the 3 people standing in my yard. "Is that true?" The president opened her mouth. I closed it. Didn't say anything. The locksmith, the one they had hired, started talking immediately. "She paid me. I didn't want to do it. She said it was legal." The officer's expression hardened. "It's not legal. It's trespassing, breaking and entering, possibly vandalism and evidence tampering." He looked at me. "You want to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." They were cuffed within minutes, read their rights, placed in separate patrol cars. The president kept trying to talk, to negotiate, to explain. Nobody was listening anymore. One of the officers asked me to transfer the camera footage. I'd already prepared a USB drive, handed it over. Complete documentation, time-stamped, unedited. He looked at the driver, then at me. "This is solid evidence," he said. "Very solid." I nodded. "I know." He asked if I needed anything else. Medical attention, witness protection. I declined, told him I was fine, told him I'd secure the property and replace the lock in the morning. He said they'd need a statement from me later. I said I'd come by the station. He gave me his card, told me to call if there were any problems. Then the patrol cars drove away, taking the 3 of them with them. The night went quiet again. I stood at my gate, the broken lock hanging useless from the chain. The planted evidence was still scattered around my yard. I left it there, didn't touch it. It was part of the crime scene now, part of the record. I walked back to the house, locked the door, and sat down at my kitchen table. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I was something else. Vindicated. I'd known they'd escalate, known they'd overreach. I just hadn't known how far they'd go or how quickly they'd self-destruct. I opened my laptop and backed up all the camera footage to 3 separate drives. Cloud storage, external hard drive, secondary phone, redundancy. Always redundant. By the time the sun started to rise, I wrote everything down while it was fresh times, faces, voices. Matched my notes to the footage and built a timeline solid enough for any courtroom. I thought about calling my colleague, the lawyer. Decided to wait until morning, let him sleep. This could wait a few hours. I made coffee, sat on the porch as the sky turned from black to gray to pale blue. The land looked the same as it always did. The gate was damaged but still standing. The oak tree stood in the distance. The fence posts marked the boundaries. Nothing essential had changed. They'd tried to take something from me, tried to break in and break me down. Instead, they'd handed me everything I needed, not just evidence, proof. Incontrovertible, documented, time-stamped proof. And now the real fight could begin. The story broke by noon. Local news picked it up first. HOA president arrested for trespassing on private property. I didn't watch the broadcast. I didn't need to. My phone started ringing before lunch. Reporters, neighbors, people I hadn't spoken to in years. I let most of it go to voicemail. The ones I did answer, I kept it brief, confirmed the facts, declined to elaborate. Let the police report speak for itself. By evening, the video had leaked, not from me. The police must have shared it with the media, or maybe someone at the station talked. Either way, it was out there. I saw clips of it on my laptop. The footage was clear. 3 people cutting through my gate. The conversation about me being old and alone. The cash changed hands. The staged evidence. It played on loop across every local channel. The community's online group exploded. I checked it that night, scrolling through hundreds of new comments. The tone had shifted completely. People who had called me selfish 2 weeks ago were now apologizing, saying they'd been misled, saying they didn't know the full story. Others demanded the president's resignation, demanded a financial audit, demanded accountability. A few defenders tried to argue that she'd meant well, that she was just trying to protect property values. Those comments got shouted down fast. The evidence was too clear. The crime was too blatant. There was no spinning it. I took screenshots of everything. The apologies, the outrage, the demands for change. Not because I needed more evidence. I had plenty, but because it showed the shift. Showed that truth when it finally comes out moves faster than lies ever could. The next afternoon, someone knocked on my door. Not the gate, the door. I looked through the window first. A woman in her 30s, alone, no clipboard, no vest. She looked nervous. I opened the door but stayed in the frame, didn't invite her in. "Mr. Waverly," she said, "my name's Tegan Sinclair. I work for the association. I'm their secretary." I didn't say anything, just wait. She glanced behind her like she was checking if anyone had followed. "I need to talk to you. About what's been happening." I studied her face. I saw genuine discomfort there, maybe guilt. "Why?" I asked. She took a breath. "Because what she did was wrong, and it's not the first time." That got my attention. I stepped back and gestured for her to come inside. She sat at my kitchen table while I made coffee. Didn't speak until I handed her a mug. "I've worked for the association for 3 years," she said. "I handle the paperwork, the finances, the meeting minutes. About 6 months ago, I started noticing things that didn't add up." She pulled a flash drive from her pocket and set it on the table. "The president's been using association funds without board approval, $75,000 over the past year. Most of it went to hiring that lawyer. The rest went to consultants, contractors, projects that were never voted on." I looked at the drive. I haven't touched it yet. "Why are you telling me this?" She met my eyes. "Because I watched the video, heard what she said about you, and I realized if she could do that to you, she could do it to anyone. I have copies of everything, emails, bank statements, meeting notes that were never made public. She had a plan to buy your land cheap after destroying your reputation, had a deal with a developer. She was going to get a $120,000 commission if it went through." I picked up the flash drive. I turned it over in my hand. "This is all on here." She nodded. "Everything. I made copies before I came. Send one to my personal email. Kept one at home. This one's for you." I plugged it into my laptop. Opened the files. She wasn't exaggerating. Spreadsheets showing unauthorized transfers, email chains discussing my property, meeting minutes that contradicted the public record, a signed contract with a development company dated 2 months before they ever contacted me. It was a conspiracy. Not just harassment, not just trespassing. A calculated attempt to steal my land through reputation destruction and legal intimidation. I looked at her. "Why risk this? You could lose your job." She shrugged. "I already quit. I submitted my resignation this morning. I can't work for someone like that. And honestly, after watching what she did to you, I couldn't stay quiet." I closed the laptop. "Thank you," I said. "This matters." She stood to leave, paused at the door. "There's one more thing. The board doesn't know half of what she's been doing. Most of them are decent people. They trusted her. When this comes out, it's going to destroy the association's credibility." I nodded. "That's not my problem. My problem was people trying to take my land. Now I have the tools to make sure they never try again." She left quietly. I sat with the flash drive for a long time, thought about what it meant. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. This was about exposing corruption, about showing a community what happened when they gave unchecked power to the wrong person. I called my lawyer colleague, told him about the new evidence. He was quiet for a moment, then laughed. Not cruel, just amazed. "You've got more than a harassment case now," he said. "You've got fraud, conspiracy, misappropriation of funds. This is a prosecutor's dream." "I want it public," I told him. "I want a trial. I want everyone to see what happened." He understood. We started building the case that night. Not just criminal charges, though those were coming. Civil charges, too. Against the president. Against the lawyer. Against the association itself for enabling the behavior. We drafted motions, prepared filings, organized the evidence into a narrative that would be impossible to refute. Video footage, audio recordings, financial documents, witness testimony from the inside. It was airtight. By the end of the week, neighbors started stopping by, bringing apologies, bringing cookies, bringing embarrassment. An older woman who lived 2 streets over brought a pie, said she was sorry for believing the rumors, said she should have known better. A young couple with kids said they'd spoken up at the last meeting, but got shouted down. Said they were glad the truth came out. I accepted their apologies. Didn't make them grovel. I didn't need to. They were just people who had been manipulated by someone they trusted. The association held an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but I heard about it. The board voted unanimously to remove the president from her position, voted to hire an independent auditor, voted to cooperate fully with law enforcement. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was a start. The local paper ran a feature story. Interviewed me on my porch. I kept it simple. We talked about property rights. We talked about the importance of documentation, talked about standing up to intimidation. The reporter asked if I felt vindicated. I thought about that word, about what it meant. I feel like the system worked, I said. Not because it protected me automatically, but because when I used it correctly, it responded. The article ran with a photo of me standing by the gate, the new lock I'd installed gleaming in the sunlight. The headline read, "How One Man Stood Against HOA, Overreach, and Won." It wasn't about winning, though, not really. It was about not losing, about holding the line when everyone expected you to fold. The courtroom was full. I hadn't expected that. County Courthouse, third floor, courtroom B. Every seat taken. Reporters in the back rows, neighbors I recognized scattered throughout. People I'd never seen before, probably just curious about the case that had made local headlines for 3 weeks straight. I sat at the plaintiff's table with my lawyer. Across the aisle, the former president and her legal counsel sat with their defense attorney. She looked smaller somehow, less polished. Her hair wasn't perfect anymore. The confidence that had armored her at my gate was gone. In its place was something brittle. The lawyer beside her looked worse, pale, nervous, like he knew exactly how bad this was going to be. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Judge Beatrice Langford. I'd looked her up after the hearing date was set. 20 years on the bench, reputation for being fair but unforgiving of misconduct. She sat. We sat. She reviewed the docket, then looked up over her reading glasses. "This is a civil hearing regarding claims of defamation, harassment, trespassing, conspiracy, and fraud," she said. Her voice carried authority without needing volume. "I've reviewed the preliminary filings. This court takes these allegations seriously. Counsel, you may proceed." My lawyer stood. He was good at this, calm, methodical. He'd been doing it longer than most people in the room had been alive. "Your Honor, we'll demonstrate through video evidence, financial records, and witness testimony that the defendants engaged in a systematic campaign to harass my client, damage his reputation, and ultimately steal his property through intimidation and fraud." He didn't waste time. Pulled up the video on the courtroom screen, the one from my security camera. Everyone had seen it by now, but watching it in court was different, more official, more damning. The footage played in silence, the 3 figures approaching the gate, the bolt cutters, the conversation about me being old and alone, the cash changed hands, the staged evidence being placed around my property. When the audio came through, her voice saying, "No one's going to believe him over 300 families," I heard someone in the gallery gasp. The judge's expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened slightly. The video ended. My lawyer let the silence sit for a moment. Then he continued. "This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a planned criminal act captured in its entirety." He moved to the financial evidence next, put up the spreadsheets that the secretary had provided. The defendant misappropriated $75,000 in association funds to hire legal counsel for a personal vendetta. She did this without board approval, without member votes, and without disclosure. Here's the email trail. He displayed the emails on screen. Conversations between the president and the lawyer about the Waverly problem, plans to pressure me through code enforcement, discussions about lowering my property value, and the final piece, the contract with the development company. Signed, dated, promising her a $120,000 commission if my land was acquired. The defense attorney stood. I tried to object. "Your Honor, the source of these documents is questionable. We don't know." The judge cut him off. "Are you suggesting these are fabricated?" He hesitated. "We're questioning the chain of custody." My lawyer answered before the judge could. The documents were provided by the association's secretary, who had legal access to them as part of her job. She's here today to testify under oath. He gestured to the gallery. The woman who had come to my house sat in the 3rd row. She stood when he pointed to her. The judge looked at her. "You're prepared to testify?" She nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge waved her forward. She was sworn in, took the stand. My lawyer asked her straightforward questions. What was her role? How long she'd worked there? What she'd observed? She answered clearly, no hesitation, described finding the unauthorized expenses, described the meetings where decisions were made without proper procedure, described overhearing conversations about me, about plans to make my life difficult until I sold. Did you ever voice concerns about these activities? My lawyer asked. Yes, she said. I asked about the legal fees. I was told it was none of my business. I asked about the email campaign to code enforcement. I was told to stay in my lane. What made you decide to come forward? She looked directly at the defendants. I saw the video. I heard what she said. And I couldn't pretend anymore that this was about community standards. It was about greed. The defense attorney cross-examined her, tried to paint her as a disgruntled employee. She shut it down calmly. I wasn't disgruntled. I was disgusted. There's a difference. The gallery murmured approval. The judge gavelled once. Order. The defense attorney sat down, looked deflated. The former president tried to speak, leaned toward her attorney. He shook his head, told her to stay quiet. But she couldn't help herself. I stood up anyway. Your Honor, I was trying to help the community. This man's property. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. Sit down. You'll have your chance to testify if your counsel chooses to call you, but you will not speak out of turn in my courtroom. She sat, face red. The lawyer beside her looked like he wanted to disappear. The judge turned to the defense. Do you wish to present evidence contradicting what we've seen and heard today? The defense attorney stood slowly. Your Honor, we'd like to request a recess to confer with our clients. Denied, the judge said. You've had weeks to prepare, present your case, or concede. He looked at his clients. I looked back at the judge. We have no evidence to present at this time. The judge nodded. Then I'm ready to rule. She didn't need to deliberate. I didn't need to take time to consider. She'd seen enough. The evidence presented here is clear and convincing. The defendants engaged in criminal trespass, conspiracy, fraud, and defamation. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. She outlined the penalties. The former president, 18 months suspended sentence. $50,000 in damages to me. Permanent ban from serving on any homeowners association board. The lawyer, 12 months suspended sentence. Loss of license to practice law for 5 years. $25,000 in damages. The association itself, mandatory independent audit. Dissolution of current board. $25,000 in punitive damages. And a formal public apology to be published in the local newspaper. The judge looked at them. You abused the power you were given. You targeted a man for standing on his legal rights. You manufactured evidence. You stole from the people who trusted you. This court will not tolerate such behavior. She gavelled once. This hearing is concluded. The gallery erupted in quiet conversation. Reporters rushed out to file stories. The defendant sat frozen. I stood. I shook my lawyer's hand. He smiled. That went well? I nodded. It went fairly. We walked out of the courtroom together. People stopped me in the hallway, shook my hand. Thank you for standing up. One man said I'd saved the neighborhood from tyranny. I didn't see it that way. I'd just protected what was mine, used the system the way it was designed to be used. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, asked for comments. I gave them one statement. Justice doesn't require drama. It requires evidence. I had evidence. The court recognized it. That's how the system is supposed to work. They asked if I felt victorious. I thought about that, about the months of harassment, the sleepless nights, the invasion of my property, the lies spread about me. I feel like I can go home now, I said, and know that my gate will stay closed unless I choose to open it. That was all I needed, not victory, just peace, the right to be left alone, the ability to live on land that was legally, rightfully, undeniably mine. I walked to my truck, drove home. The gate was waiting. The former president moved away within 2 weeks of the judgment. I heard about it through the neighborhood grapevine. Packed up in the middle of the night, left no forwarding address, didn't say goodbye to anyone. The house went up for sale a month later. Sold fast, below market value. Someone wanting a quick exit. The lawyer lost more than his license. Lost his practice, his reputation, his client base. Last I heard, he was working in insurance. Not practicing law. Just processing claims, the kind of work that doesn't require trust. The association itself underwent a complete restructuring. The remaining board members resigned voluntarily. New elections were held. The people who stepped up were different, quieter, less interested in power, more interested in actual community service. They hired an independent auditor like the court ordered. The report came back worse than anyone expected. More unauthorized expenses, more backroom deals, more violations of their own bylaws. The new board president called me personally, asked if he could come by and apologize on behalf of the organization. I said yes. He showed up on a Saturday morning, older guy, retired engineer, sensible shoes, no clipboard. We sat on my porch. He didn't waste time with excuses. "Mr. Waverly, we failed you. We let someone take control who shouldn't have had it. We didn't ask questions when we should have, and you paid the price for our negligence." I appreciated the directness. "You weren't the one who broke into my property," I said. He nodded. "No, but we created the environment where she thought she could, where she had the resources and the backing to do it. That's on us, on all of us who didn't pay attention." He pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check, $25,000, the punitive damages the court had ordered. "We're also publishing a formal apology in next week's paper, and we've amended our bylaws. No board member can spend more than $500 without a full membership vote. Every meeting has to be recorded and minutes published within 48 hours. Financial statements go out quarterly." "That's good," I said. "That's how it should have been from the start." He stood to leave, shook my hand. "If you ever need anything, call me, and I mean that, not as a board president, as a neighbor." After he left, I deposited the check. I didn't need the money, but I took it anyway. Donated half to a local legal aid fund. The kind that helps people who can't afford lawyers when someone tries to push them around. Keep the other half. Maeve would have approved. She always said money gained from standing up for yourself should go toward helping others do the same. The neighborhood changed after that. People waved when they drove past. I stopped to chat when I was working in the yard. A family down the road invited me to their kid's birthday party. I went, brought a gift, stayed for cake. It felt normal, like the tension that had been hanging over everything for months had finally lifted. The woman who had been the association secretary, the one who'd brought me the evidence, got a new job. I'd recommended her to my lawyer colleague. He hired her as a paralegal. She was good at it, detail-oriented, ethical. She stopped by once to thank me. I told her she'd earned it herself. The media attention faded gradually. A few national outlets picked up the story, ran pieces about HOA, overreach, and property rights. I got interview requests from podcasts and YouTube channels, turned down most of them. I did one newspaper interview. Keep it focused on the practical lessons. Document everything. Know your rights. Don't let bureaucracy intimidate you. The reporter asked if I had advice for others facing similar situations. "Get everything in writing," I said. "Record conversations where legal, keep a timeline, and don't react emotionally. Build a case, let the evidence speak." The article went viral in property rights circles. I got letters from people across the country, people fighting their own battles with associations, with neighbors, with local governments. I couldn't respond to all of them, but I read every one, saved them in a folder, evidence that this wasn't just about me. It was about something bigger, about the line between collective good and individual rights, about what happens when that line gets blurred. 3 months after the trial, the state legislature introduced a bill, new regulations on homeowners associations, mandatory financial audits, limits on enforcement actions, requirements for due process before penalties. They called it the Property Rights Protection Act. Someone told me they'd cited my case in the drafting notes. I didn't follow it closely, didn't testify at hearings. That wasn't my fight. I'd fought mine and won. If it helps others, good. But I wasn't looking to become a crusader. I just wanted to go back to living quietly on land that was mine. And mostly I did. The oak tree still stood in the middle of the property. The fence posts still marked the boundaries. The house still creaked in the same places. But the gate was different now. New lock, stronger. I'd upgraded the security system too. Better cameras, better audio. Not because I expected more trouble, but because I'd learned the value of documentation, of being prepared for things you hope never happen, only on my terms. That was the whole point, not keeping people out for the sake of it, but maintaining control over what was mine, over who entered and when and why. That's what property rights meant. That's what the fight had been about. And in the end, that's what I'd protected. Not just land, but the principle underneath it. The idea that some things belong to you and no one else gets to decide what happens to them. I walked back to the house. The sun was setting. The sky turned orange and purple over the ridge. Inside, I made dinner, ate on the porch. I watched the stars come out. It was quiet. The good kind of quiet. The kind you earn. 6 months later, spring came early. The wildflowers Maeve had planted years ago bloomed across the property in patches of yellow and purple. I hadn't touched them, let them grow wild the way she'd intended. The oak tree leafed out full and green branches stretching wide over the center of the land. Mornings are warmer now. I could sit on the porch with my coffee and not need a jacket. The world felt softer somehow, like the sharp edges of winter had been filed down. I'd replaced the gate lock with something heavier, industrial grade, the kind that would take more than bolt cutters to breach. Not because I expected trouble, but because I'd learned that preparation isn't paranoia, it's prudence. The security cameras were still running. I checked them once a week now instead of every day. The footage was always the same. Deer, delivery trucks, neighbors walking dogs, normal life. The property itself looked better than it had in years. I'd cleared brush from the fence line, repaired sections of rotted posts, restained the porch, not because anyone demanded it, because I wanted to. Because taking care of something you love isn't about meeting standards. It's about respect for the land, for the people who held it before you, for the promises you made. I thought about my grandfather sometimes, wondered what he'd think about everything that had happened. He'd fought in a war to come home to this land, built a life on it, passed it down with the understanding that it meant something, that it wasn't just property, it was a legacy. The private property sign at the gate had been repainted. Clean white letters on black background. Simple, clear, no ambiguity. The gate itself stood solid. The iron had been treated for rust, the hinges oiled. It opened smoothly when I needed it to. Closed with that same satisfying weight I'd always known. One Saturday afternoon, a kid from down the street came running up to the gate, maybe 8 years old, chasing a ball that had gotten away from him. It had rolled into my driveway, stopped just inside the fence line. I was working on the porch steps. Saw the whole thing. I set down my tools and walked over. The kid stepped back when I approached, uncertain. I opened the gate, picked up the ball, and handed it to him. He took it carefully. "Thank you, sir," he said. I nodded. "Next time, just knock. Ask first, okay?" He nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, I'm sorry." "Nothing to apologize for," I said. "Just remember, you want to come on someone's property, you ask permission." His parents were standing on the sidewalk watching. I waved to them. They waved back. The kid ran back, ball tucked under his arm. I closed the gate, listened to the lock click. That's what it was supposed to be. Not a wall, not a barrier against the world, just a line. A clear delineation between what's yours and what's not, and the understanding that crossing it requires consent. I walked out to the back of the property, to the place where the oak tree stood. Underneath it in the shade was the small memorial stone I'd placed for Maeve 3 years ago. Simple granite, her name, the years. Nothing flowery, she wouldn't have wanted that. I knelt down, brushed away some leaves that had gathered around the base. "We made it through," I said quietly, talking to stone, talking to memory. They tried to take it, but we held on. The wind moved through the branches above, rustled the new leaves. It wasn't an answer, just wind, but it felt like one anyway, like she was still here in some way that mattered, in the land, in the trees, in the fact that I'd kept my word. I stayed there for a while, watching the light change, watching shadows stretch across the grass, thinking about what endurance meant. Not just surviving, but remaining yourself through the process. When I stood up, I walked back toward the house, stopped at the gate one more time. I looked out at the road, at the development beyond. Lights were coming on in the windows, people making dinner, living their lives. The association had stabilized. New leadership, new rules. People seemed happier, less tense. I'd been the catalyst, the line they couldn't cross. Sometimes that's what it takes. Someone saying no, someone standing firm, not because they're stubborn or difficult, but because they know where the boundaries are and refuse to let them be erased. I tested the lock one more time, solid, secure. Then I went inside, made dinner, ate at the kitchen table while reading a book I'd been working through for weeks. After dinner, I went back to the porch, sat in the same chair I'd sat in that first morning when I'd seen the white SUV pull up. the same chair my father had sat in, and my grandfather. The continuity of it struck me, how some things persist not because they're extraordinary, but because they're solid, because they're maintained. The sky darkened, stars came out, more visible here than in town, no light pollution, just darkness and points of light in the vast quiet of open space. I thought about everything that had happened, the harassment, the lies, the break-in, the trial, the aftermath. All of it felt distant now, not erased, not forgotten, but processed, filed away. Part of the story, but not the whole story. What remained was this: the land, the gate, the house, the promise kept. I'd fought when I had to, documented everything, used the system correctly, let the truth do the heavy lifting. And in the end, the truth had been enough. Not because truth always wins, but because I'd made sure it was heard, made sure it was backed by evidence, made sure there was no room for doubt. I finished my coffee, stood, stretched. I walked to the edge of the porch and looked out one more time. The gate stood at the end of the drive, closed, locked, exactly where it should be. I lingered on the porch a moment longer, listening to the stillness settle over the fields. The air smelled faintly of rain and cut grass, the kind of scent that carries memory. Somewhere a distant coyote called, answered by silence. It felt like the land was exhaling finally at rest. I turned off the porch light, went inside, locked the door, set the deadbolt. The house settled into its nighttime sounds, creaking wood, distant wind, the hum of the refrigerator. In my bedroom, I looked out the window one last time, could just barely make out the silhouette of the gate against the darker road. It will be there tomorrow, and the day after, and every day after that, as long as I was here to maintain it, as long as I remembered why it mattered. The land was mine, not because I said so, not because I fought for it, but because it had been earned, by blood, by sweat, by promises kept across generations. And no one, no association, no bureaucrat, no group of neighbors with clipboards and opinions could take that away. Not legally, not morally, not ever. I closed the curtain, got into bed. The last thought I had before sleeping was simple, clear, final. This land is mine, the gate is closed, and I am home. Sleep came slowly, the kind that doesn't erase the day but folds it neatly away. Somewhere outside, the wind moved through the oak leaves like a whisper from the past. The house breathed with me, old timber settling walls, remembering. In that quiet, I thought of every hand that had built, mended, or defended this place. My grandfather's, my father's, mine, maybe someday someone else's. The thought didn't trouble me. Legacy isn't about ownership, it's about endurance. And as long as this house still stood, so did we, all of us, in the grain of the wood and the roots of the land.
From all of us here at QA Stories, thank you for watching. Smash that like button, drop a comment, and join us again for more unbelievable stories.